好的，各位长辈、贵宾，尊者达赖喇嘛藏人行政中央代表办事处感谢您今天能参加这次北美在线藏汉交流的活动，主题为回顾尊者达赖喇嘛游往62年。62年前的今天，也是1959年3月31号，是尊者达赖喇嘛游往踏进了印度的第一天。一甲子2年的时间已过，但是藏人的语言文化没有从世界上消失，这是因为在过去的62年里，藏人在尊者达赖喇嘛的指导下，把自己的文化保护到现在，同时也在让世界看到了藏人佛学文化中的慈悲与智慧的知识。尊者达赖喇嘛的4大使命：推动人类一体性的信念，促进宗教和谐，保护西藏的文化、宗教、生态环境，还有复兴古印度的智慧，是为了整个人类的未来。各位很多朋友是面见过尊者达赖喇嘛的华人老朋友，所以通过此次的会议，希望能看到华人心目中的尊者达赖喇嘛是什么样的。还有各位对尊者游往已过62年的看法。各位贵宾可以在英文或中文里发言。因为时间的原因不能提供翻译，但是我们会把今天的视频保留下来，加上翻译字幕后发到网上。Greetings to all distinguished guests. On behalf of Office of Tibet, Washington, D.C., I welcome you to joining the North American online Sino-Tibet dialogue titled 62 Years of His Holiness Dalai Lama in Exile. March 31st, 1959, it was the first day when His Holiness the Dalai Lama reached in Indian border, and today marks the 62nd year of this special date. In these decades, Tibetans in Tibet were facing brutal genocide policies implemented by CCP, but Tibetan language and culture remained alive because Tibetan followed His Holiness' guidance of preservation of language and culture. His Holiness' principal commitment to promote universal value, encourage religious harmony, preservation of Tibetan language, culture, plus environment, reviving of ancient Indian knowledge contributes to a better future for the entire humanity. I hope through this event we can see how Chinese see His Holiness the Dalai Lama and your opinion on His Holiness in exile for the past 62 years. You are free to speak either in Chinese or English. In order to save time, we won't be able to translate. 首先有请欧珠次仁先生。欧珠次仁先生是前藏人行政中央教育部的部长，早期藏人议会的议员，现任尊者达赖喇嘛藏人行政中央驻北美代表办事处的代表。Please allow me to invite Mr. Ngudrup Tsering, the representative of His Holiness the Dalai Lama and Central Tibetan Administration to speak. 恭维了。
First of all, thank you so much. It's so good to see a lot of familiar faces on the screen. And then when I look at you, I see the great future leaders of democratic China just in front of me. How privileged it is for me. So it's great. It's my great honor to really see you after a long time. Due to COVID, we could not meet as often as we do before. So once again, I really want to apologize for not speaking in Chinese language. I'll try to be very brief in what I wanted to say. And as all of you, actually, you've been a great supporter of Tibet and also democracy in China and human rights, freedom. So we are on the same boat. And you know about the history of Tibet. So there is not much need for me to go deep into, these kind of historical facts. But as Sutimla mentioned, once again, thank you, Sutimla, for, initiating this sort of conversation between our Chinese brothers and sisters and the Tibetan people. The march, on the whole, if you look at it, it's a very momentous month for Tibet. 10th March, which is, Tibetan national uprising. It's a national uprising against the Chinese communist regime occupation of Tibet. Then the 17th March, when His Holiness Dalai Lama left Potala Palace for, freedom, for a free country. Then the 31st March, when he entered the India for, exile or for refuge. So month of March itself is really, very significant, sort of a landmark in the history of Tibet. And it also opens up a new chapter, as we know, in the, history of Tibet-China relationship. Also opens a new chapter in the history of Tibet-India relationship, So this month has changed also, on a national level and at the same time on a personal level. For instance, His Holiness Dalai Lama was our God King in Tibet before this month, before March 31st. And now he became an exile, refugee, living in India. And then Tibetan people, those who were able to escape, like, many of you, into exile, in a free country, we are able to enjoy our life, freedom, everything. But those Tibetans, majority of them who are in Tibet, they are still suffering, still continuing, under the brutalities, under the tyrannical regime, now even more under the Xi Jinping regime of the CCP, right? So this month has changed a lot for the Tibetan people, from the leadership to the main, general public. And as soon as His Holiness arrived in India, and the Indian government was very kind to offer him asylum, and then the first thing he did was to establish the Tibetan government in exile, which is now very much intact in Dharamsala. And then at the same time, he changed the governance from a theocratic, system in Tibet, which he was the supreme leader, to a democratic governance. So we have a Tibetan parliament started from 1961 in exile. And right now, there is the executive, there is the parliament, and there's a judiciary for the Tibetan people. And it's all functioning from Dharamsala. So in 2011, His Holiness actually devolved, as many of you know, the political power to the elected leadership. Many of you met Dr. Sangye. He is our elected president of the Central Tibetan Administration of Tibetan government in exile. So when you look at His Holiness and then also try to compare with the Xi Jinping of China, they are two very different personalities, right? Here is the Dalai Lama who is giving out his power to the people, say, this is your responsibility. This is your destiny, which you have to take the responsibility of shaping it up. Whereas Xi Jinping says, all of you have to listen to the CCP. We are your ruler. We are your, the masters. And the Chinese people, who are 1.3 billion, you are nothing but for the CCP. So that's a kind of thing. And he has been amassing power over power. And even nowadays, wanted to rule the world, control the world, right? So now see, as a result, after so many years of the international community trusting and respecting China. Now, when I say China, I'm talking about Chinese people. And then the CCP is an entity. It is just an entity. It is a party and a military that is ruling over 1.3 billion people. His Holiness has always said, China belongs to the Chinese people, not to the CCP or not to any political party, right? So in the similar way to the Tibetans also, he was saying, Tibet belongs to the Tibetan people, So for that matter, you can compare it with any other system That is why now, see, CCP's own doing under the Xi Jinping. Like now there is a genocide in Xinjiang, and then the Hong Kong issue, and then Taiwan issues, Southern Mongolia, and you can see how intolerant this autocratic, government is doing. How, authoritarianism, tyrannical government of Xi Jinping is inflicting huge cruelty, to their own people, including Han Chinese, right? And now when you look at the present situation in the world, everybody in the free world, democratic world, when you talk about China, there is a sense of contempt. There's a sense of disliking, So it is actually not the Chinese people. It is the Chinese regime that they have been doing all this kind of, sinister design, doing sinister work, which is now inviting the wrath, the anger, the rancor of the international community, right? Even just recently, look at what is happening in New York, what was happening in San Francisco and Los Angeles, and even in other places in the United States. There's Asian hate. That's kind of environment now brewing, right? It started actually from the pandemic, from the COVID, from the manhandling of the CCP, of this epidemic, this pandemic, right? And then many other things right after. So now who has to face the consequences? It is the general people. Who did it? It is some people who are ruling. They are the ones actually should be responsible for all these things, even now here in the United States. Otherwise, there is some small level of Asian hate or the hate to other countries, other communities, but now it is growing up because of the COVID, because of the manhandling by the CCP, So, it's not only the Chinese people, all the minorities of the Asian outlook, we are all having this problem, right? So it is actually the doing of the Chinese leadership. Now, in terms of Tibet, the Dalai Lama and the Tibetan administration is very sincere in trying to really work with the Chinese leadership for the solution of Tibet-China problem. But, the Chinese leadership, see, they have introduced last May what is called as ethnic unity law. It promotes the intermarriages between the Han Chinese and the Tibetan people. Now, when I say promote, it is not in the normal sense. You know how the CCP works? They put a word like promote, but then they use all the cursive method to get that done, to fulfill that, the policy. So through which they wanted to totally wipe out the Tibetan, heritage or the Tibetan ethnicity. Then in, last year, September, there was again a policy of Sinicization of Tibetan Buddhism. Now they call all the Tibetan lamas, reincarnate lamas in Tibet, and then ask them to write about, the communism, about how great the Xi Jinping is, how great the Mao Zedong is. They even went to the monasteries and say, okay, this is the Buddha and other things, not the object you should worship. You should worship Mao Zedong. You should worship Xi Jinping. So this is a Sinicization of Buddhism. Through that, what they are trying to achieve is total destruction of the Tibetan Buddhism. Now the bilingual policy, it was there since 2010, but lately accelerated the implementation. Now even in the kindergarten level, primary level, the Tibetan is taught only as a subject, not as a medium. So therefore, what happens is the Tibetan people in Tibet, they are not able to learn their own language properly. This is the biggest concern of the majority of Tibetans, elders, because they think that now they are not able to communicate properly with their children also. So these three policies, what are they aiming at? The total elimination and the total assimilation of Tibetan people. So, the aggressive measures and policy of the Xi Jinping in a way, it's genocidal, and that's what they're doing. But they don't understand that where there is aggression, there will be resistance. And the Tibetan people, now our younger generation has taken the responsibility already to continue the fight against the communist regime of China, right? So this is continuing, and it has started since 1959 until now, 62 years, and it is continuing and will continue unless there is a proper, mutually benefited, mutually win-win sort of solution to the problem, right? So this is the story of Tibet at the moment. But as you know, like us, you also want to see a very prosperous, very free, democratic China. So I think we all have to work together. And there are now Hong Kong people. There are also now there are Uyghur people. There are Taiwanese. There are Mongolians. So the communities, people who the CCP has victimized in years before. Now there are many, they're growing. And then I'm sure it's just a matter of a few years in the Southeast Asian countries, smaller countries. They are right now under the weight of economic dependence. They're working with CCP. Otherwise, they're not very happy. So, these things will continue. And I hope the Chinese leadership, before too late, come up and awakes its realization that what they're doing is not the solution for the freedom and for the goodness of all, but it's a problem. So with these words, again, I really want to thank all of you for participating. And since many of you will be speaking in Chinese language, I may not be able to understand, but I'll later on catch up with Tudimla about this. Once again, we should meet often and sort of continue the conversation back and forth. Thank you very much. And on behalf of Central Tibet Administration, on behalf of His Holiness Dalai Lama, I pay you our respect and say Tashidele, and you are the future leaders of China. Tashidele.
Tashidele.
非常感谢代表先生，把尊者把民主制度赐给了藏人的故事，也讲解到关于藏人目前的状况。